My guest today is AIA architect Michael Tower of Michael Tower Architecture in New York City. He's received his master's in architecture from Yale University and has taught architecture at the Parsons The New School of Design and the Pratt Institute. As a New York Times published architect, Michael's work has recently been recognized by the DZine Awards for Outstanding Design. Born in Detroit, his style is partially inspired by old automotive factories, and we're about to hear more about that. Welcome to the show, Michael. Thanks for
Thank you,
being
Thomas.
here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Great, great. So, Detroit, what happened yesterday? The
Well,
Lions.
they can blame the onside kick, I guess. I don't know. They all put a bunch of numbers up on the board, and hopefully they'll get a second chance.
And there was the Buffalo Bills, right? That kind
Yeah, that's probably the biggest problem. Yeah.
of I know, right? So you're a football fan.
Yeah, and a baseball fan too. Big Tigers fan as well as a Lions fan. So, I can go on and on about that.
You can.
Yeah.
So, Detroit, where did it be? Where did it start? Were you born in Detroit? Actually, yes, you were.
Yeah, I was born in the city of Detroit, and lived in West Detroit, in a Polish neighborhood called Warrendale. And then we moved out of the neighborhood, when I was around 10 years old, out to the suburbs, west of, so halfway between Ann Arbor and Detroit is where we kind of really landed. And yeah, I mean, my interest in architecture, I always wanted to be an architect. I don't know where the inspiration came exactly, but I've had time to think about it, that's for sure. I think a lot of it has to do with being from a place like Detroit, not just because of the factories, but because everyone around me was involved in this, project of building cars, right? So you had machinists, you had assemblers, you had engineers, you had, all these you had artists and designers, and everyone kind of working together to build this, you know, this automobile. And I think even though I knew at a certain point I realized engineering wasn't for me, which is really what a lot of my classmates in high school were interested in doing, I knew
Right.
that I wanted to do something like that. I was a maker. I was surrounded by makers, and art was really what pulled me out of Detroit, I think, and art plus all those other activities finds kind of lands pretty well in architecture as a skill set and as a project. So that's kind of the story, basically.
When you have a vision that actually comes to fruition, when you see it being done in front of you, that's really really nice. I come from a plastering background, so mixing sand and mud and plaster and then putting it on the wall and then seeing a finished product is sort of what you're talking about.
Right. And that's a perfect kind of dovetail because you think about the Diego Rivera mural in Detroit. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's this
The Detroit
plaster
Institute, right?
wall with a painting on it of all these people together working, to build an automobile. And I think there definitely is a nice kind of dovetail there in our conversation.
So the mindset back then was all about manufacturing. My
Yeah.
father started off also in the plastering business, went back to the tool and die,
Ah, okay.
worked for Timex, so he had the same, and then went back into the construction.
Huh.
So what did was your father involved in Detroit?
Yeah, he was an engineer, but he never finished college, but he was recognized as an engineer. He worked for Detroit Diesel his whole life.
Yep.
But he was also an artist. So in high school, he had an art teacher that thought he was fantastic, and he got a scholarship to go to art school in Kansas. But it was 1960s in Detroit, and he had to get a job, and he never let that go, which was great. And never had a complaint. He never looked back. He had a great career with Diesel. But it was that artistic influence that really landed with me. He would take my brothers and I to the Detroit Institute of Arts when we were kids and, look at paintings and the suits of armor and all the kind of things there. And it really helped kind of inspire me in my career.
So what are you working on these days? What are you doing right now? Like what's your favorite project you got in the mix right now?
Well, I've got a couple starting up that are pretty interesting. I've got a new brownstone that just signed today in Park Slope. I'm up for an NDA client in Museum Tower. I don't know if I'm going to get that one or not, so I'm excited about that. That should be really interesting. But I'm in the middle of a construction project right now in Tribeca that has a funny kind of story. When we talk about careers and how long we've been at it and how things kind of come full circle, that's a good one to share. But that one's very interesting. We're renovating the whole place and really helping resituate a loft space,
Right?
and this went through a renovation in the early 90s. Um,
Uh,
before Tribeca, like Soho, was well established as a high-end kind of residential neighborhood.
right.
So we're undoing a lot of uh, previous decisions that really undermine the quality of it. The kitchen's really terrible. So that's an easy one. But you discover all these things too, it's just what makes this interesting is being in the mix is I went in there, I looked at when we were talking about it, looked at the floor. It had a really opaque stain on it. I hope I'm not
Right.
getting too technical, but
No, that's the more
and
technical, the better. I mean,
you
I'm a
might
GC. I mean, how more technical can you be, right?
Well, okay, then you'll appreciate this. So my builder comes in, he takes a piece of wood out to and checks it to verify whether it's white oak or red oak because we didn't like the opaque stain. We wanted a more natural finish,
Right.
which has its risks when it's existing. And the species he pulled up was white oak, which is great. I'm like, oh, good. I like white oak. You can do a lot more with staining on that.
Absolutely.
So we had a big patch to do when we ripped up the kitchen and so floor guy comes in, starts sanding. It ain't just white oak.
No.
It's
What
a
was
mix
it?
of red oak, white oak,
Oh,
quarter sawn, maybe a rift here and there, plain sawn. It's whatever they had in whatever pile as they were putting the floor down because they didn't really it wasn't a high-end space to begin with. It wasn't even I mean if it were a factory floor, that'd be another story. It would be fun
yeah.
to play with some old timber. But so it just kind of underlines all these kind of surprises that you encounter when you get in. So we have a good floor guy. So he's saved us from, you know,
Having to replace the whole thing,
having to
or
replace the whole thing. We have not replaced the whole thing. No, he's a very good floor. He did a very good job on the stain and balancing and bleaching and all this to get it right. But a
if
whole
I
lot
may
of
ask, what was the name of the floor guy?
Stan. I don't know his
Stan?
last name.
Well, there's some good stands out there. I
Yeah.
have a couple of good stands myself, I mean, they just know how to kind of put something on the floor so that it becomes one flavor or one color, and then you can
Yeah.
build on top of that.
Yeah, and it's funny because my client is there all the time with me. And this is the other thing about, the way I practice. You try to explain to them who they've never been through this before. She's never been
Right.
through this before in particular. And I have to explain that it's not like a paint color that you're picking. You don't can't expect that you're going to put it on the wall and have it look like you think it's going to look. And we can go on about paint colors for that matter too.
Yes.
Plaster, but with floor stains, you can't just mix a red in with a blue to get a green, and it like between the colors inherent in the species of the wood and the stains, however odd they are. I still don't understand Duracell. I don't know how these guys create these mixes that work. And so we probably went through 20 samples to get this color just right. But it's worth it when you get it right. So
Kind of like sand it, water pop it, use bleach, and they, put a neutralizer on it, and then your color can stay your color, right?
right, right. But it's hard when the species are different. That's a real challenge.
Yes, very
Real
difficult.
challenge.
Believe me, I know. We ordered a flooring one time on a project, Siberian wood flooring, and the
Ah,
flooring came in different and short. We were short like 200 square feet, and we had to like almost remanufacture the color. And
right.
yeah, I got a couple of great floor guys. They're like colorists, hair colorists. Now they can do anything.
I think that's a perfect analogy. Which is also why I've fallen in love with pre-finished flooring. You
Yes,
limit, first of all, it's great. It's durable. There's good thick wear layers now, and you have
yes.
really good control over color and finishes. Far fewer surprises.
We used to be afraid of pre-finished floorings because of protection, but
Yeah,
now with the protection and core board and all this stuff, you can do a pretty good job. And if
yeah.
you get a problem, you can always cut it out. It's a lot simpler.
It's
But
really
I
simple
like the millimeters a lot thicker, and yeah, it's constant, and it doesn't. There's no complaints in the winter when it when it
Yep,
starts to
no
expand and
movement,
contract, right?
less surprises.
So your process, tell me a little bit about your process, because I know the process. I know that my process after your process is different, but
Right.
the phone call, how do they find you? What do they like? What inspires them? How do you get these people to like, and how do you get clients that want to know too much to stop knowing too much, you know?
It's in my opinion, it's kind of random, but if you're in a place long enough, the chances of coming across these folks are greater. So it's word of mouth largely. So builders, brokers, and clients are how I get my referrals. Sometimes publication, but rarely. I mean, the publications are great. I love to be recognized, but it's about relationships. And so I have a lot of good relationships with a number of builders and brokers, of course, who always need help when people are looking. So that's how they find me. And then, the conversations are interesting. So yeah, it's funny. You're downstream from all that kind of dialogue that happens before.
Yeah,
But
very rarely do I get to be first. I get to say, "Hey, Michael, I got a project that a client wants me to do, and I can invite you to the job." That very rarely happens, but yeah, continue to embellish what you were telling me about how you
well, I
meet.
mean, it's a journey that you go on with these people. So you really have to find the right people to work with. And so the process is about a pretty intensive dialogue and situating them and trying to understand where they stand with design. The budgets are straightforward, and that's always a sometimes a tough discussion. We have to really think about the scope of work that they have and their needs and things like that. So we have to flesh out all those kind of details. But the real meat of the conversation, once you get those things established, is the design process. And I think teaching in undergraduate and graduate level was a great way to kind of prepare
Right.
me for that discussion because
Exactly.
it's not that they're novices. They know everyone has an opinion on design. In fact, I would hate to work with someone who didn't have an opinion about design because if they didn't have one at the beginning of the process, they will at the end. And so you better hope they get what they're expecting or they don't even know they're expecting yet. So it's really about meeting them where they are at when they talk about design, because we can use words about what's modern, what's eclectic, what's traditional, and you might have a different idea what that means than I do. I do it all the time, so I think I know, but it doesn't matter what I know and can authoritatively tell them falls in those categories. All that matters is what they're saying and how they view it, so that I can help guide that process, into a vision that they're excited about and are willing to go through with me, that's the other part of it, right? Which is how
Yeah.
do you get to permits? And I mean, I don't know how much time you have, but it's it's an exhaustive process. And
We have all day.
well, you've got, I mean, the first thing you have to do, of course, is figure out what you want to do, and you have to establish that design, and you get your documents together, which is a whole nother, exercise. And then it's just going through the kind of approvals phase with whether you're in a co-op or a condo or a condop, you've got to go through some sort of building management review with another architect before you even get to the Department of Buildings and Landmarks. And that can be both very frustrating for clients and a real hit to your schedule. And I try to warn people about that in advance. I mean, I can control the design process pretty well as long as everyone more or less follows the decision-making process with
Right.
me. And I love that process, but eventually you have to get it built. So you've got to go to building management. They pass it off to the building architect, and depending on who the architect is, and of course the building, whoever they hire, it's a pretty intense process.
Yeah.
And there too, are a set of kind of personalities and skill sets that you don't necessarily know what you're getting. On one project, we went to the building manager used a very large reviewing architecture firm, and we got a summer intern reviewing our documents, which
Oh,
which was interesting.
must have been
And
difficult.
Yeah.
Because
Well, they're all difficult in their own way.
he had to show his oats to his boss, so he had to ask lots of questions.
Yeah. That was the first time I ever had that experience, and that was interesting. But usually most of the building architects come across are pretty reasonable people, but they're strict.
Yeah.
And I used to worry about the Department of Buildings. No way. These guys are the gatekeepers, and they have the kind of unique interpretations of waterproofing details.
Oh,
I've seen some crazy things that they've asked for that I would never
wet
do.
over dry. You're wet over dry, dry
Wet
over
over
wet.
dry issues. Well, the funny thing about wet over dry is people think that it's the building architect that says whether you can do it or not.
No.
They kick it to the board. They say, you have a wet over dry situation. It's up to you, whether or not you do it, which is, and I have to say, just to roll back, whenever anyone's talking to me about buying a place, they're like, oh, we'd like to expand the bathroom. What do you think the board's position is on wet over dry? And I'm like, your best bet is to look at other renovations on Street Easy to see who might have done it. So there's at least precedent, but it's anyone's guess whether they'll allow it. Buildings have been more reasonable, to be honest with you, about it.
Yes.
And this is
Yes.
actually a crucial discussion for anyone looking to buy an apartment in New York and renovate it. And they've gotten better about it because waterproofing has gotten better,
Yes.
I think. And so the standards are clearer. There are certain things that you can do to make that work. But to see the building architect's interpretations of waterproofing details are fascinating to me. I'm not always so sure that the manufacturer would agree with them, but you're in a bind. You have to decide how you're gonna, if I'm gonna alter my waterproofing detail, for example, to make this building architect happy, when I know that, for example, fleece is not applied that way. You can't, that's when you have large gaps. They don't really want you using that way, but
Nope.
okay, we'll do it. Or I had this crazy situation where a, a building architect was requiring that we put a water sensor tied to a shutoff in the stud wall.
Oh. Hmm.
So I'm thinking, okay, water comes from all different places, not just from a bathroom, and moisture too, for that matter. What happens when that sensor goes off, which it does all the time, and I know you know this.
Oh, they're very tricky. They're very
It's very
sensitive.
tricky. And so what are we ripping out the tile to get at that sensor that's buried in the wall? I mean, so there's lots of situations like that. And it's my job to help negotiate that, navigate that, push back if need be. But remember, pushing back takes time. And you have to really kind of juggle a lot of kind of priorities to get this through, just to get out of the gate, to get to the Department of Buildings and to
Absolutely.
landmarks.
So the waterproofing detail, I've seen a crazy one, and let me just explain this one to you. So the architect says, the water actually, we protect the bathrooms, waterproof the bathrooms from right, from the inside out or from the outside in. The
Yep.
walls get all. But he says to me, what happens if the shower body or the pipe behind the wall starts leaking? How do we catch that water? So what they did is they did a double waterproofing. We waterproofed the substrate, the first substrate, terracotta, all that. So made a bathtub there, and then stud walls, and then another waterproofing, so that if any water got behind the walls, it would not go down
It could
below. Because
stay there
most water,
forever and ever. Wow.
yeah, that's a
How
pretty
long
heavy.
how long ago was this?
Just recently, we
Really?
actually have a project right now on 57th Street,
Oh,
53rd Street.
okay. Yeah. I
So
just did one
yeah,
on 57th a couple years ago. So,
yeah. Matter of fact, that brings me to one of your projects on 57th Street. I love it.
oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Beautiful. I was looking at it. And this goes back to what you mentioned before about if I can actually determine what kind of design you have. So I called that 57th Street
Yep.
uh, a
Straight
modern
up
take
modern.
on what you did with the nice blue colors, the dark colors and the waterfall
Yeah.
island. I couldn't figure out the floors if they were walnut or if they were teak. There's something exotic, those floors, aren't they?
They're walnut. They're
They're
walnut.
walnut.
And and they're pre-finished, um, which is a very common thing, by the way. We can talk about pre-finished a little bit more just because of all the soundproofing requirements now.
Yes.
But that's a walnut floor with like a lye kind of bleaching a little bit to it. So
Get
I
some of
have
the
a
sap. You had some sapwood in there, it looks like.
Yeah, this finish this. So it's funny when you think about pre-finished floors. I can't believe there's a whole the whole episode on pre-finished floors here, but
Great. Let's do it.
the person that I work with, this really great finisher out in New Jersey, and he he supplies a lot of my pre-finished floors, and he can get some just amazing things out of. I really don't do a lot of walnut floors. I tend to not like them because they're so typically yellow or too dark for a
Right.
floor. I mean, white oak is, is probably overused, but it's dependable. It's got a great grain.
Yeah.
It can take color anyway. But that's a walnut one, and we got a really nice finish on it. I was very excited about it. And it looks different in different lights too, by the way. So it
Yeah.
looks more
No.
sappy and rich in some settings when it's darker, but when the light's really pouring in, you see some of that lightness. No, actually, I take that back. I don't think you used too much lye in that one. That's a little bit darker. I'm but twice in the last few years. So
I love the slotted wall also. That's
ah,
that's that's that's
thank you. Yeah,
becoming
the
it's
Tambour
becoming
panels.
it always was popular. It's coming back a little bit, the slots and
It's
stuff,
coming back. Yeah. I mean, I used it in my chief clubhouse for the executive women's club that I did down in Tribeca, and I was looking to find a place where it might work inside a residence, and so we use that as kind of a headboard for that one.
So again, who was your flooring guy on from Jersey?
His name is Craig. He has a couple different, it's Essex coatings, but I think he's got another name for I'll get you the info on him. He's
It's all right. No,
fantastic.
just wondering because I just want to see if you happen to might mention a subcontractor that I know. That's why I'm asking.
Ah, okay.
Because we're talking about flooring, and flooring is some of the most difficult things to achieve.
Well,
And
I found him. I'm going to get in trouble saying this, so we might have to edit it. But I work with a very high-end flooring pre-finish floor company. That's great, but they're so expensive that some of my clients can't touch it.
no, I
So
know staying
when I
competitive.
was when I was renovating my place, I knew I couldn't afford that floor, even with a beautiful discount that they were kind enough to offer me.
Right.
And so I was calling my supplier out in Pennsylvania that I like a lot, that they do a lot of my hardwood. I'm like, what can just all the horse trading that goes on in
Yes.
this process. And they're like, well, we could supply our wood to this guy who does really nice finishing in New Jersey. His name's Craig. We use him a lot, and he might be able to give you a decent price, and we can try to figure something out to get you the finish that you're looking for. And I looked him up and I looked at his address and I realized, because I'm involved in every aspect of these things, that it was the same as the ship from address for that high-end flooring company. So
Right.
turns out he does their finishing. So I kind of did an end around to get the same quality of finishing on these floors with a better deal. And someone a little bit more responsive. So it's been a good relationship. I've been working with him for 5 or 6 years now.
Beautiful.
Um,
It's always nice to have
yeah,
relationships that work and you stay with them because you can count on them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so your Warren Street penthouse, Warren
Yes.
Street penthouse. I'm gonna label that one as collective. Is that sort of where
Uh,
we're at? A little,
eclectic, transitional. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
pretty right. Yeah,
collective.
that kitchen is very much traditional. There's no way
Yes,
around
yes.
it.
And I like the two-tone,
Yeah, thank you. Well,
with the
that's a
copper and the,
yeah, that's Bakes and Crop. That's a manufactured kitchen, which, by the way, made in Michigan. Just a little plug for them. Um, so if Craig's listening, but
Michigan.
yeah, no, that's a great one, and that's an interesting client, and that's one I teamed up with a decorator on that is more modern,
Yeah,
and so we found a really great way to kind of thread the needle on that because the place itself is a brand new building,
yeah.
giant windows,
I
very
see the three. I see
modern.
the three panes of glass right there. Beautiful. Boom.
Yeah, and there's a terrace. Their outdoor space is almost the same size directly above them. So
Really.
it's huge. Yeah, it's a great place. Great client too, by the way. And yeah, you would call that transitional, I think, mostly. But I feel like
Yeah.
we took the modern part pretty far still. Um, Very traditional taste, but it dovetailed nicely with the whole team.
Yeah, I love blending. I love blending. I
Yeah.
like blend. I mean, I've done so much, work in my career as well, and I find it hard to see. So I'm blind to design sometimes. But that's why it's nice to see what you do and what other people do, and we can build anything. But
Yeah.
and you're into commercial work as well.
Yep. Yeah, interesting
Beautiful,
commercial jobs.
beautiful
So
tower, the tower research project.
yeah, Tower Research, no relation. But
Yeah.
yeah, did a lot of floors for them on Broadway and on Lafayette. Interesting company, very very different design sensibility there too, because it heavily Asian influence, even though the owner was not, you know, not Asian, just had this incredible collection of Buddhas and other near and far Asian kind of collection. It was just, and so our job was really trying to refine that idea, that design identity into what we came up with, which was really definitely kind of a Japanese inspired idea about joinery and detail, but with plenty of steel and metal and contemporary materials too. It was a lot of fun. A
Well,
lot of fun.
the muttons on the door are incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah, the
so.
millworker loved us.
Yeah, I can
That way.
imagine. So, relationship with mill workers, you must have a lot of that as well, just as much
Yeah.
as flooring.
Oh yeah. If there were any trade that I was going to do, it would probably be millwork. I mean, that's what I love most. I love everything about millwork. It's the finishing. It's my kind of precision. I'm not a machinist, so I'm not going down into 1/64ths or millimeters for my tolerances. So I think I would land pretty well on millwork. But I love millwork. It's where a lot of functionality comes to bear, you know,
Right.
particularly in a kitchen and where you want stuff and how you want that to operate and can it fit? Can it accommodate this or that? Yeah, I love it. I love it.
So, getting back to the 57th Street project, what kind of client was that project for?
Well, they're an interesting couple. They're Canadian. Um, and one of them, the wife went to Yale, and that's how she found me through that kind of connection. But she works in finance, I want to say, and he was an attorney, and he was working in compliance, and now he's kind of stepped into nonprofit. So a very interesting couple. And
Yes.
they travel a lot, as you can see from the kind of the masks on the wall, things like that. They both have lived in different cities all over the world and have kind of collected all these objects as they've made their way around, the globe.
The clients really make the project or break the project. What I mean is, you have people that have certain types of, work ethics and the way they live and whatnot. But it's nice when you find someone that you really can link with, right?
Yeah, and I link with most people. That's the thing. I think, I really enjoy that aspect of what I do, honestly. I mean, it's not that they are friends, I guess, technically speaking, but pretty close. I mean, I feel like you really get to know a lot about them. Because oftentimes people come to me when their family's growing or when they're downsizing, when their kids are gone. And so you learn so many interesting things about these people. It's hard not to really feel invested in getting them something really beautiful and that meets their needs. It's great. And it's a journey too. Let me tell you, remember talking about going through a building management review or for that matter, a budgeting process? Those are really the first trenches that you're in with people and um, you know, you become bonded through that experience.
Absolutely. So that leads me to the word humanism.
Yep. Yep. Humans.
So,
Humans make buildings.
so
Humans create
collaborate on that a
designs.
little bit.
Well, I'll go back to the Diego Rivera mural because I mean it's a labor of love, but it's a labor, right? And so I think architecture needs to acknowledge, you know, not just, I mean, inevitably it acknowledges human craft, right? That somebody made something. But it has to feel good to the touch for the people using it. Light has to come into the space and light, changes the way you see things and see materials and creates shadows. And so, um, yeah, I think it's impossible not to imagine how people use the space or how it's made and being aware of that. I think you see it in the materials. I think you see it in the details and the way things come together, the way your hand touches those details. I'm always thinking about those things, and I think that's the human aspect to it in the
Right, right.
humanism.
They feel your passion.
Yeah, and their passions too are manifest in it, you know. I mean, I do feel that my clients feel very connected to the end product, the final piece. And I love hearing about how it works or doesn't work. You know, when we're shoehorning a bedroom into, a space, or trying to fill out a living room, or, really developing a kitchen idea about how it's going to be used and by who and all that stuff.
So how many times you come across a client that basically sees it come to three dimension and says, "Oh my God, I didn't. This is not the way I thought it was going to be."
Oh, it happens. It happens, and you got to be ready. But I think, in my opinion, and I let people know, it's going to look different than what you're seeing on a screen or on a piece of paper,
Right.
and you have to kind of, hopefully with excited anticipation, look forward to that moment when you walk into the space. And it's funny, and they go through stages, and I mean, with a certain amount of humor, I tell them it's an iterative process, like there
Right.
is. I wouldn't call it trial and error, because I do believe in logic, and that, design decisions, for example, is a funneling process. You're narrowing it down to what your real vision is, your core idea. Um, but then it kind of opens back up when you get into construction. And I love the reaction I have and people have when you walk into a demolished space after they've been staring at these walls for, the past few months, and making those plans. And so things get really big all of a sudden. And then
Right.
the framing goes up and they're like, oh God,
So we're
it
going to
just got
hold that.
small again.
We're going to hold that thought right there. We're going to take a
Okay,
quick break,
sure.
um, and we'll be back shortly.
All right, great. I will hang tight.
We lost him. Oh,
He just turned off his.
oh, okay.
You still there, Michael? Yeah, he's there. I think he just
Okay.
turned off his camera. Okay, so whenever you're ready, Michael, we're ready to roll again. Michael, are you there? Ready for you whenever you are, Michael.
He went to the bathroom.
Don't look off camera, because I mean, like whenever you say thanks for being here, don't look over me at all. Just
Yeah.
yeah, just look straight at the camera for hold that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gotcha.
It's
Yep.
hard for me to that's
Yep.
off camera.
You may want to text him.
There. You still. Hey, Michael, can you hear me? Hey, Michael, you there? Seem to have lost you. So, I mean, as soon as he turns his camera back on, it's going to pop up side by side. So.
Yeah. Yep. Michael, whenever you're ready. You have his number.
There he is.
Hey.
Oh.
Hi there, bathroom break.
I knew that. I said to his, all good, all good. So we got this on. So, yep, yep. 3, 2, Michael Towers, architect. Born and raised in Detroit, came over here when he was about, what, 10 years old, you said?
Not to New York, no. I came over here when I was about 19.
19. I missed that
19
one.
to New
I'm
York City,
19
yeah.
years old.
I went to undergraduate at Cooper Union.
Sorry about that.
That's
And
okay.
okay, I have a timeout. Three, two. We're back with Michael Towers, architect. So, Michael, where did we leave off? You left off with we were demoing.
Yes,
Client walks into a space and
it
boom.
seems huge, right? And then
Right.
they put the wall studs up, and that seems small again. And it's kind of a roller coaster, for them. If you haven't been through the process, I mean, just this as well as anyone. It's until you're really finished with it, you don't quite know what it's going to look like. I mean, you can anticipate it, you can do all sorts of things with material boards and renderings and drawings, but until you're in there, that's the true test of the design. So, but I think most people understand that, and if you've done a good job, then they're going to be thrilled when when it does come together. But you do everything you can in the beginning to kind of prep them for that.
Yeah, so clients see the space, and we used to be able to do more demo prior to construction. We used to be allowed to do more
Yeah.
demos. So I was on
Yeah.
a project one time where a client asked me if I could actually take down this wall so they can actually get a vision of the river. So I asked the super, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, no problem. The board went, what are you doing? So now they don't want you doing any demo until everything's approved, because but
Yep.
anyway, so your client goes through the space and you have your contract. So how do you go about hiring a contractor? Does everything go out to bid? Do you do pre-construction? Do you like picking the contractor first? How do you go about doing that?
Well, every project's different. Sometimes a client will come to me with a builder.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, a lot of times they don't, and they'll ask me for, recommendations. Sometimes they'll throw a name into the pool.
Right.
We typically bid it out. I recommend to three builders, and what I try to do is put together a mix of people. So people that have a personality that I think would work well with them, because I actually think that goes a long way.
Absolutely.
People that have a certain skill set for what we're doing, for that matter, or some that might have a certain managerial, backbone that the project might warrant. I mean, my jobs are single residences in apartment buildings, so you don't need too much, you don't need Procore or any of the other kind of
Yeah.
software for that, but you do with larger projects. So like if it's a commercial job, definitely I need somebody with a big kind of, project management team. But it's all about kind of getting that mix right for it to be successful. So I think personality goes a long way. I think the skill set and their familiarity with um, the way I detail. I mean, I love working with guys that I've worked with over and over for years. It's great because I don't have to re-explain how I
Right.
want my pivot hinge mounted and where exactly I want that. Or,
Right.
they know already that I'm going to be asking for a museum baseboard, before they even see the drawings. And so there's all those sorts of things that come with, long-term relationships that I have. And on occasion, I'll have to kind of cobble together a team. I don't like to do it because it puts me in an awkward position of
Right.
picking your pitcher or picking your catcher. But there are a lot of mill workers that I like to work with and that are great that I oftentimes will invite into a context where the builder that they don't know, they've never worked with, will team up. But that comes with its own hazards because that's their relationship and that's something they should have. So, but if I know a millworker can do something that nobody else can, they're gonna join the job.
So you have certain design characteristics that you kind of bring into each project? Do you have a certain design? So tell me a few of those that you like to repeat because that's something you like, you know?
Well, I don't,
It's
I
almost like
try
going to the
not,
same place for dinner, you know? What do you like? What's your characteristic? Your design
well,
characteristic.
I think, the roots of a lot of what I do, even though, as you can see, I work in a lot of different styles. So,
Yep.
there are, if I think there's going to be a lot of metal work, I'll know who I want to reach out to in Brooklyn
Right.
that I like that kind of thing, or they might be particularly good at finishes, like the Tower Research Shop, for example, is
Yep.
super, super important. Um, but yeah, some are better than others, depending on the mower, but the GC for that matter too. So I do like to. This is a little bit meandering, so I'll kind of try to keep it simple. But my roots are I've done a lot of minimalist work, so work that's been really inspired by artists like James Turrell, the light
Yep.
artists, where you're creating these kind of beautiful, pristine planes of material that are backlit, that create these sharp edges, and so I'm often going to the Milgo Bufkin bin to get some nice heavy gauge broken metal for my profiles. That's a nice go-to, and certain builders don't know from Milgo. They're like, I don't know how to make this, and you get some
Nope.
flimsy piece of tinfoil showing up on site, and it's like, no, no,
Nope.
here's the phone number. Give them a call.
Yep.
I'll take care of you. It's not that expensive. It's worth it. You can paint it,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So that's one example.
I love Milko Bufkin, and we've done a lot of improvising with Milko Bufkin as well. So
I bet as a
I'm a
plasterer for
minimalist as well.
sure.
I'm a minimalist builder as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So Milko Bufkin, what's your next characteristic that you like? Are those the reveals, reveals off the
Yeah.
floor, your flush details, and
Yeah, I think then it goes to the way my doors are detailed and the way that meets a certain casing detail. I think in traditional work it's you have to give up a lot of space, but it's a lot easier to deal with that
yes,
because I mean, I like to use offset pivots quite a bit. I think
yep,
they're overused, to be honest with you, which is why I don't only do minimalist work because I think there's more going on that you can kind of exploit to get more bang for your buck, so to speak. But I do love it. And I love the challenge. I swear to God, that I would challenge anyone, even people probably less so people that install. So carpenters might, that have experience with this would be able to kind of correct me if I'm even wrong. But placing that hinge and that pivot and how that pivot reads in the space is really important to me because I do like a clean door plane. But I never liked the shoulder on that pivot.
I know.
And so I use my own apartment as a laboratory for this. And I have this great carpenter that I've worked with for close to about 15 or 16 years. And he's, he, like me, is kind of gotten
He knows
educated
the
on
Michael
everything.
Towers School of Ballet, right?
That's so to speak. And we found a way to we developed this solid poplar uh, casing detail. So what I did in the case of my little laboratory is I planed down some 6/4 poplar to around 1 1/4. That seemed proportionally right. And what we did is we threw the edge of that profile proud of the wall, depending on because these are plaster walls. So I gave myself a good 1/2 inch to 3/4,
Yep.
just so it doesn't look funny. And that was just enough to capture the knuckle on that pivot. So you don't see the
Yep.
only the
You
only
don't see
little
that
bit you
knuckle.
see is at the floor. And so it just really cleans it up. I mean, honestly, it's a small accomplishment, I know, but I know you can appreciate this too. It's just
Sure.
like that was fun.
We're always trying to, maximize the detail, especially like
Yeah.
on pocket doors.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Pocket doors are
Pocket door,
tough.
the pocket door tracks were always the ugliest thing you could see. So we actually came up, since we did some residential work outside when we were
Yeah.
younger,
Yeah.
soffits and fascias, we would bend metal off site. We would bend white metal or black metal and encase that whole pocket so that you wouldn't even see. All you would see is a black.
Oh, yeah. Usually I'm asking them to paint it, but I never thought of
Yeah,
showing.
adding some metal in there would be is a
Nice.
great detail.
I gotta take some notes. Well, I guess you're recording this,
Well,
so.
we're gonna talk again for sure. So getting back to, so contractors. So how do you
Yeah.
deal again with, I mean, there's things that happen, right? I'm a contractor. There's things that happen. There's third party delays. There are accidents. There are things that break.
Yeah.
There are leaks that take place
Yeah.
sometimes that we on a Friday we're installing a refrigerator. We hook up the ice maker machine, and that ice maker machine drips all the way to Monday, and it's just like it really a simple boo-boo or just something that you didn't foresee could really. So have you been involved in some of those
Every project, it seems like.
right? It's
I
what
mean,
we
just the
call it.
other day, on this job in Chelsea that I'm doing right now, the interior walls are, I think they're an inch and a half thick. Okay. Which means black rod, lath, plaster. That's how
Yep.
these walls are made. And they're remarkably straight, durable, fantastic. What I didn't know is that the walls separating the apartment from other apartments were similarly thin. So I had an electrician trying to put a box in the wall for the refrigerator, popped a hole through into the neighbor's closet. And fortunately, it was their closet, not their living room, and we were able to patch it. So how do you deal with that? You laugh sometimes if it's not catastrophic. You cry if it is. And hopefully that builder has a good relationship with the super or resident manager such that they can turn off that valve right away if it's a leak and you get in there and deal with it. But the trick is making sure that the client understands that there are a lot of moving parts in this process, and it's impossible to know every possible, situation that could come your way. But through time, you kind of iron those potential, hazards out, and other times you just have to react quickly. But that's all. A lot of that's on the builder. It's not really on me. It's usually on me to explain to the client like this happens, and we have a good builder. They're going to take care of it, and everything will be fine.
And schedules are always
Schedules, well,
you
yeah.
know
Well, I mean, the last few years have taught us a lot about supply chains.
right.
So the good news is the press has told our clients this as well.
Right. So they
So
don't
the
have to
first
go.
thing they ask me is, are they shipping the Sub-Zeros yet? Have they finished? And I'm like, yep, we're okay now. They
18 months on a Sub-Zero.
Right. But I mean, lead times are often, I mean, the biggest problem with lead times falls with kitchens if you're doing a manufactured kitchen. Sometimes special finishes on plumbing fixtures, but most of my clients understand, you know, that if they want something special, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer, for some of these things. So it goes back to communication. You have to warn them when you're in the design process about what might come up with certain things or things that you're hearing. But there's certain things that are just out of your control, like the Department of Buildings not showing up for your rough-in inspection.
Right.
And if you've got gas, you're not doing anything until they take a look at it.
Yeah.
And the client understands that. They're happy to be mad at the Department of Buildings, and I would rather that than my builder, or the plumber in that case. So
Yeah. I mean, clients have become, I'm talking about the clients to left and right and top
yeah,
and bottom, become very
yeah,
territorial and very emotional when you invade their space because, I mean, I could see if, I live in the country, so we got space, but when you're living so close to each other, I'm amazed that some people don't understand it. Stuff happens, right? Cracks happen, dust mitigation and stuff like that.
oh
So
yeah. And don't get me wrong, not to interrupt, but like it seems it seems as if when people see the neighbor doing renovation, they start scheming for how they might get a little touch-up paint here and there. Like, oh,
yeah,
suddenly those cracks are because of, the work next door when it's not. And the builders I work with, anyone that's worked in New York knows long enough that you just have to assume you're going to be next door taking care of something for someone at some point that may have nothing to do with what you're doing.
well,
Just to
I
moving.
like to survey apartments. I make sure that we
Yeah.
survey. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you probably do that now. It's mandatory now. Survey all departments, take pictures, and make sure we mandate. And if that crack was there, that crack was there. And at the end, you know, if they do get a little, you know, upset, we say, listen, let's try to come in and maybe we can paint the bathroom ceiling for you. You know,
Right. Yep. Yep. Goes
that
a long
leads
way.
me to your firm. How do
Yes.
you, how many people do you staff? How do you work? How does you?
Well, we're about four people right now, and but you know I've really tried to the way I staff is usually the way I set up my projects. So I don't do a lot of projects at once. I like to have at most two or three going on actively in the process. Now, of course, projects take longer than a year, so it's oftentimes I got about 4 to 6 jobs happening kind of at the same time. Half are in construction, half are in design and approvals, because I have come to learn that successful projects need to be managed really well, and I think um, the repeat work that I get, which is quite a bit, has to do with me being there through the whole process and being able to answer text messages, WhatsApp messages, emails, calls, whatever, at any time of day.
7 ways they
And
can get you.
yeah, and I only have so much bandwidth. So if I get too big or too busy, then I have to rely on, you know, on a PM or somebody like that. And I am cultivating that talent that happens, but at the end of the day, they're paying for my clients are paying for me to be there to get them through this process, not somebody else. And I think there are other much larger firms whereby the name on the door is not the name that's of the person that's going to be on site, you know,
Right.
when something comes up or when, you know, crucial design or fabrication decision needs to be made. And so I've purposely kept it at this scale. It makes me happy. I think it gets the best possible work for my clients, and I know it, you know, it makes my clients happy too. And these
And
are
it's quality of life for yourself as
quality
well.
of life, quality of work, quality of life. Yeah, it's all kind of the same thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of sacrifices that comes with this, as you know. You know, I mean, you're not doing this unless you really love it, honestly. Um, and there are easier ways to make money, if you ask me, more predictable ways to
If
make
we
money.
chose, I said to myself, I chose to put 8 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours. I could have picked anything, right? I could have picked stockbroker. I could have picked flying a jet. I could have picked anything. And I picked this because I like people. I like being recognized. I like being published. I like this. This is great, you know.
Yeah.
So cultivating new, new people for your office, like new
Well, I
talents.
mean,
I mean, you're close to the school that you taught in, so they must filter some through there, I would imagine.
it does. It does. Absolutely. I mean, New York's a great place for talent. So
Yeah.
we've got that going for us. But I don't treat my employees didactically like I would in a studio setting at a school, but there is something to it. And I think to me, and we can talk about architecture education on another podcast, which is a long
Yeah.
discussion about how architects are trained.
Yep.
And the way
I would like to do that.
yeah, well, the way American schools approach design different than European schools. I
Yep.
mean, um, I think a big part of the learning process once you join a firm is understanding, well, just how things are done, but how design happens. And I think oftentimes you get great designers coming out of school and they immediately retreat because they run into this complex system. Um, and at a firm where, of course, the person whose name is on the door is in charge of design. And so we do what that person tells us to do. And so a good amount of time, I spend a good amount of time getting people oriented around the design process and how they can fit into it. Because I do believe, just as when I taught, that there is a process to design. There is training your eye as a designer and thinking
Right.
about the decision-making process that goes into discovering that design vision. So that's really crucial. I mean, it's and that serves, you know, everything else you do serves that task, you know. So it's the way you detail, it's the care that you take in measuring the space when, you know, day one, when you've when your client's taken possession of it, you know, making sure that you've got it precise, looking for those risers that might conflict with these grand visions that we create. and then really constructing a set of documents that communicate to you, the
Right.
builder, on how it's done. And
Like,
but the people coming out of architecture school don't necessarily understand that. And there's no reason they would. There's no context that you could I mean, to recreate what you and I do in an academic situation is like
very tough.
very tough. So I get it. But there is that kind of on-ramp that you have to get onto to get on that path. And then getting to care about construction is another important thing. And that's, I think, comes down to who you are and maybe where you're from. So my investment in detailing and knowledge about how things are made is inseparable from the way I design. I can't say that's the same for everyone coming out of architecture school. That doesn't make me
Right.
better. I mean, there's the kind of technical things that these students are coming out of school with are amazing. But being able to apply it in the built world is a whole nother, enterprise. And it takes a little work to get people oriented towards that, at least in my office, because it's super important.
So technology leads me to technology. What
Sure.
technology are you using to help bring the lines and the visions to fruition, to the client's standard of what they can see? Because a lot of clients can't see.
No, they can't.
They can
Well,
only visualize.
I use the industry standard for production work now. I use Revit from Autodesk.
Yep.
I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah.
Uh, it's interesting because most of the students coming out of architecture school know Rhino, which is a very different 3D visualization thing. And now they're kind of mashing up so you can plug Rhino into Revit now, which I've yet
Right.
to try. But Revit is, frankly, they're a bit behind the curve on
Yeah.
technology, if you ask me. But what I like about Revit is it thinks like a builder. And that's exactly the kind of dialogue you want to be having early on. So if you can build it, you can build it in Revit. If you can't build it, or you're going to need, to send it out to Zaner in Kansas to fabricate it, then you can use Rhino or whatever 3D program. So I use Revit, and what's good about Revit is I can do real-time renderings with people. They're not as high quality as hiring a renderer, but
Right.
those kinds of renderings are a waste of energy, if you ask me. I use a program that's plugged into into Revit that allows enough visualization to understand how materials are mapped, how patterns are happening, how light's basically moving through the space. And I've learned in the past that when you do invest a lot of time in doing finished renderings, clients get angry. They don't like it because you didn't design it with them. You just show up with the design and tell them that's what it's going to be.
Right.
And I remember the first time that happened, I was like, oh, they're not impressed. They don't want that. They want to be involved. And so I found a nice kind of sweet spot that keeps me on production, by the way, because that's the beauty of that program is it allows you to um, that 3D model that you're looking at are your working drawings, and they're all dovetailed. So we have invested a lot into the kind of high degree of functionality that we can build. And so there's a kind of subset of this, a sub part of this program called families that allow you to build parametric kind of elements into it. So I have like 4 different styles of millwork that can be totally adjustable to the space or the modules that I'm looking for that allow me to, turn those into millwork drawings really quite quickly.
How do you think, how is AI going to help you with that? Because AI is going to be, I mean, I don't even know
Well,
yet, right? I mean,
I definitely heard lots about it. It has
we
yet
don't.
to impact me. My worry with AI is that I'm going to not get to do the fun stuff.
I
So
know.
that's my worry. But I do think it will make certainly, I mean, I know what Autodesk is doing. They're just holding their breath till AI fixes Revit. And I think it will. I think it
Yes.
will basically make my life better because I have wasted a lot of time on that program getting nowhere. So, I think it'll help. I'm going to stay positive about it for now.
So what's next? What's next? What's next for you?
What's next for me?
What's next in your future? What do you see your next 5 years? What do you see happening? You're going to stay working in New York? Are you do stuff in Miami? Are you going to come outside into the city? You know, what's
I
the
would
next
love to
exciting
get out
thing?
of New York. I am a little bit. What's great is, so I've been working with this matcha company called Kettle, which you've got to check out. They're amazing. They're a commercial client, and I did their flagship in Greenpoint. That's where I got the Dazine Award for.
Oh,
And
the tea, oh, the flagship, the tea. Yes, I was going to
yeah,
ask you
the
about
tea
that.
place. They're amazing. They're really an
Really?
amazing group of people. Yeah, just their brand, their ethos, this whole idea about this kind of this whole flavor profile that New York really doesn't know much about. And so they've kind of helped really introduce it to all these, amazing kind of chefs and things like that.
Wow.
And they bring with it this kind of idea about ceramics and the kind of ceremony and stuff like that. But to go back to your question, that's got me to Los Angeles because we're doing a cafe out there, and that's been a lot of
Nice.
fun. But it, that question even goes further back to kind of the long-term relationships that I have with clients. I keep waiting for some of these folks to move out, to go to Westchester, to go to
Yeah.
Putnam County, or to go to Long Island and ask me to do a house for them. It hasn't, they've stayed put. I guess they're rooters like I am, so to speak. But I would love to start doing houses again. I mean, I miss it. When I first got out of Yale, I worked for my former professor and her husband, and they did a lot of houses in Long
Right.
Island and in Westchester and further north. And I miss it. I love that stuff. So that's if that happens the next few years, I'd be very happy.
I think it's going to happen. I think this Hudson Valley area outside the city is going to grow amazingly.
It is. Yeah,
I
you're right
just
about
feel the
that.
push coming already.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I have one client that I did follow up. So I did his um, my old client Bill. He's my oldest client, technically speaking. My wife worked with him back in the Internet 1.0 days, and he started an ad agency. I did both his ad agency build outs. I did his place in Windsor Terrace, and then he sold his agency and started a barbecue uh, restaurant. And I did that in Gowanus for him, and then he moved upstate to Chatham, and I renovated his house and did an addition, and then he
Oh,
did
wow.
another restaurant further north, or well, I guess technically that would be east of him in Massachusetts
Yeah.
to do a place for him. So
We just
I
worked in
just need more people
Massachusetts.
like that. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we started doing a couple of, Chatham I know very well. We just worked in Alfred, Massachusetts. So
Yeah.
we're centrally, we're in a good location. Our
Yes.
base is outside the city about an hour, but everything's inside the city. So we can go to Connecticut, New Jersey, but Manhattan and outside the city. And we're also in Miami right now.
Oh, great. Yeah, everyone seems to be there. I've
Yeah,
not gotten a call about Miami yet.
I want to be there. I'm getting a little, I
Right
like the
now,
cold. I'm
yeah.
getting a little. So that brings us to the point of almost the end of the show here. Where I want to ask
Oh,
you, where
all right.
can we find Michael Tower Architect? Where can we find you?
Where can you find me?
Yes.
Well, you can find me at michaeltowerarch.com.
Okay.
And you can find me on Instagram. Well, that's a little bit more of my wanderings about the city, looking at art and, dragging my kids along as I wish.
Right.
So that's where you can find me for sure. Or you can, if you're ever in Nolita, just come on down to 49 Elizabeth Street and knock on my door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're gonna plan on coming to see you.
Great.
Well, today was great. I am really happy that you took the time and came on the show today. It's been so nice to hear what you do and hear about all the things you're passionate about, and your roots in Detroit, and graduating from Yale and teaching, and it's been wonderful. So I really want to thank you again, and I will be speaking to you soon.
Thank you, Thomas. And I am flattered to be invited, and I feel like we share that same passion. So I'm glad I could join in. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Yeah, we can keep talking now. We just wanted to, yeah,
All right, great. Yeah.
because what I do as soon as we end the show, I'm always peeling away.
All
But
right.
you got to sit there for a few minutes because he
You
needs
gotta
to
wait
like
for the
4 or 5
start. Wait.
seconds, get the right bob. But yeah, no, that was excellent. I
Was
really
that good? I don't know. I hope I didn't ramble too much. My
oh,
wife's
you know
like, you
what?
gotta.
You got to remember, and I'm going to tell you a little off. This is off the podcast record, right? So
Uh-huh.
me being a salesman and sitting on this side,
Yeah.
listening and listening and listening, listening is a very tough thing sometimes for the Dutchman because I like to sell. And when I'm sitting here listening and I'm taking this approach of just really listening to what you're saying. It's really a great thing because I don't listen very well most of the times because I'm on sales, right?
Right.
But the last several dozen podcasts, it's been really great for me to listen, and I hear things about you that I really like. I mean, I've been doing this 30 years, and I'm glad I met you through this because we do beautiful work as well. We have great project managers. I have great floor guys. So when I hear you have great floor guys, I'm like, really? There's more great floor guys? There's more great kitchen people. I mean, there's an architect that loves that blue color, like I love that blue color. So that's the passion. I do have a lot of passion, and I wake up sometimes. I tell my kids, I start every day like it's the first day at Dutchman. It's not like I own a pizzeria and they're waiting outside and let me have a slice, pepperoni, but it's not like that. We're managing so many people's expectations and personalities and just so many moving so many moving parts,
Yeah.
that you don't know what you're getting and how you're gonna. So it's impromptu.
Right.
It's like being thrown stuff, and, oh,
Yeah.
we're
Big
we're
time.
a very special breed of people that
Yeah.
can deal on
Yeah.
your
There's a personality trait
yeah,
for
your
sure.
your personality, how you deal with your clients, and then how I have to deal with them. And we do a great job as well. So I would like
Yeah.
to continue with this. You're going to get an email from the team,
I would
and
love
then
that.
we'll send you some information about us. But I like to come meet you in person for sure.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
pick up on that passion. I think it's what you're doing is very smart. I feel lucky to be a part, like sincerely, to kind of help join in on this. I think it's a great way to start a relationship too. So
you
I
know what
can't
it
wait to
is.
learn more.
Well, I heard you say Europe against American. I would love to do a topic
Oh,
on that
yeah.
whole
Well,
how.
I'll tell you right now. I mean, it might be too esoteric for most people, though, to be honest. But yeah, no, American architecture schools are kind of the byproduct of this kind of technocratic education, more engineering based and more like
Yep.
if I do this, I get that kind of thinking
Yep.
and production. And the European schools, I had this wonderful woman that I hired pretty much fresh out of school at Royal Academy of Copenhagen. She was Norwegian, but out of Denmark,
Right.
and I didn't have to explain anything to her. It's just like she understood the design process. And the problem is it's hard to explain the design process because
Yes.
yes, it's subjective because you're putting something out there. There is a way to want to categorize it and to understand it. You have to take a step to do it and be unafraid. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. I'll go on and on
I
about
had a
anything you want
thought.
me to
I
talk
see
about.
all these big malls closing. How students basically just get general knowledge in college. I'm a specific knowledge kind of guy. Kids that went to Georgetown. I have kids that did this. I have kids that and I just feel that if you, I mean, I have a great accountant. I mean, how hard is math? It doesn't take 4 years to learn how to be an accountant, but
Right,
there's a lifestyle with college, and I'm not against college at all, but
right,
our industry is now being shortchanged by too many parents saying, "Hey, you got to go to college."
right.
But you can go to tech school. You can learn to be an air conditioning company. You got to be just as smart, man, and you have to have that personality to know how to put things together and be business. So I think it's just as exciting sometimes to be in the field of construction as it is to be in the technical field. And what you were saying about being in the technical field of architecture is that if the kids could get more hands-on
Right.
during college instead of so technical, I think it would make a better result for kids that come out of college to help designers and architects.
It does, and people have tried it too. Yale has this great thing called the Building Project, and every year so I came in. I have a uh, B Arch, so I have a 5-year degree from Cooper Union. So I
Yep.
didn't have to go into MArch 1. I went into a different sequence at Yale. But for
Yep.
the students that have no kind of architecture background, they have to collectively design. They get groups of people, they design a house, and then they have to literally build it. Every year they build a house in New Haven. Um,
Wow. Amazing. That's
and
great.
yeah, it's really great. It's actually friends of mine that were in that sequence. Ben Bischoff, Oliver Freundlich, and Brian Pappas, they started a design build firm called Made. Do you know about these guys? They're
I've
a
heard
big,
about
big
them.
deal.
Yes. My
Yeah, well,
son graduated.
Oliver,
My son graduated from Quinnipiac, so I'm in that area. And my wife, my friend who's a building inspector, his wife worked at Yale, so I've been there a lot for
yeah, so
lacrosse tournaments and stuff. Yeah.
but they've tried, I mean, schools have tried to kind of,
Yeah.
retool it to get students more grounded. They don't always get the information. They don't always get it necessarily. They come to those schools with their own ideas of what architects should be too. So it's a funny
So,
profession.
so again, thank you,
Yes,
Michael
thank you.
Tower from Michael Tower Architect from the locker room, off the camera, in the camera. We talked about some more things that were pretty exciting. So I want to thank you again, and I really thank you for being here and taking the time, and I really enjoyed
Thank you,
your
Tom.
company. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
All right, you too. Take it easy.
See, at the end of the show.